There are two sides to every story. The National Broadcasting Company presents the vivid drama of life itself, broadcasting's original program of mediation, the Court of Human Relations. And now the man who has familiarized millions of people with the idea of mediation helped to make it a creative force in American life. A.L. Alexander.
When you go to a good movie or a play, what you see is a man or woman placed in the position of overcoming some obstacle or other. If everything in the play went smoothly, there would be no drama, and you wouldn't go to see it. The fact is that each and every one of us is the central figure, even the hero, in the most exciting play of all, the story of his own life, struggling to overcome some disappointment or adversity. Now, the great strength of these proceedings, we believe, is that none of these situations is ever really unique, but like the thread of a pattern, spreads out into the whole interwoven texture of human life. Through the examples mediated, certain truths become evident, and countless other people, facing issues not unrelated, may share these experiences and benefit from them, experiences which illuminate their own existing situations. Now, we welcome our distinguished mediators who have that happy faculty of getting to the heart of a matter, reducing what appears to be a complicated situation to its simple, essential elements. Miss Fannie Hurst, Dr. Ralph Emerson Davis, Dr. Robert J. McCracken. Now, as we turn to this case, number 4022, in which, as in all these cases, the disputants are the actual persons involved, perhaps the mediators can put the pieces together in what amounts to a kind of jigsaw puzzle. Now, here's the complainant.
Mr. Alexander, I find myself in a very disturbing situation. I'm the manager of an act which has had quite a measure of success. Of late, something seems to be happening that is threatening our future. My wife seems to be in constant disagreement with my brother. My brother is in constant disagreement with my wife. This consists of three of us, myself, my wife, and my brother. And I find myself in an awkward position of constantly being in the middle.
Now, what is this all about?
Well, we have contracts that must be fulfilled.
And suppose you give us an idea of what takes place.
In an act such as ours, which requires coordination and a spirit of harmony, which does not exist at present, these people don't even talk to one another. My wife constantly complains to me about my brother. My brother constantly complains to me about my wife. They both say that I take sides, and I'm in between.
And what about the more personal aspects?
Well, the situation recently came to a head when we had to fulfill an engagement out of town. My brother asked me whether we could take a girl along. My wife objected strongly. The girl did not go. My brother kicked up quite a fuss and threatened to quit.
You were the brother?
I made a simple suggestion and asked my brother if it was all right to take my girlfriend on a trip to Atlantic City. I thought that there was no reason why they shouldn't allow me to.
You felt this was entirely reasonable?
Yes, I thought it was. And they refused. And I was really upset.
And were you amazed that they'd refused?
I was amazed, and I didn't think they would turn me down by not letting me take this girl with me.
And is this the only thing that happened?
Well, usually my sister-in-law's gowns, I said they're awful, and I always get insults.
Well, before we get into the gowns,
Yes.
suppose we hear first about this trip from the wife.
My response is simply this. This is a business arrangement, not a social engagement. I think this party has a lot of nerve to assume that it's a social engagement. I see no reason why we should have inflicted upon us strangers whom we know nothing about, for whom we care less. Furthermore, there's nothing in the contract that says that I must be asphyxiated by his foul-smelling cigars.
This is what I'm up against all the
My
time.
clothes simply reek from them.
If I told you of all my complaints, it would take the time of this whole procedure. And I have told her many times of her gowns, and I
What's
think
wrong
they're
with
awful.
the gowns?
Well, the styling, the color, the fabrics, everything is wrong.
Being a woman, I think I'm the better judge of what I should wear, what's most becoming to me, especially since I pay for them myself.
What do you think of people who have a car and will not take anybody with them and make up an idea that in case they had an accident, they would be financially liable?
And that's the reason that they don't want to give your girl or anybody a ride.
That is
They're afraid they'll
exactly
have an accident.
Mr. Alexander, I've always thought this was a good act. I'd like to see it continue. My husband's brother is a good performer, but if he constantly brings personalities into this, I just don't see how it can work out. With all due respect to everyone involved, it seems to me a man is far closer to a wife than he is to a brother. And if it's a matter of obligation, my husband has a greater obligation to me.
This is what I'm up against.
This is all right in ordinary life, but I don't see where this concerns our act. This is an act.
It has this connection. It's causing a serious rift between my husband and myself. My husband must make up his mind just which is more important, his obligation to me as a wife or his so-called obligation to the act. I'd always hoped that we'd be able to get along together, but if my husband's brother wants to make an issue of this, my husband will just have to make up his mind where he stands.
Miss Hurst?
Well, it's difficult as I sit here and listen to realize that you three adults, with a great deal at stake, namely an act over which you have undoubtedly worked a great deal and which is a success, are allowing yourselves to be practically ruined by the trifles that have been under discussion here. Now, your husband, of course, is between the devil and the deep sea. He is the unfortunate member of this trio. You're all unfortunate. But your brother-in-law does not like your gowns. You do not like the odor of his cigars, and you apparently do not like his friends. Now, those are issues that in their stature are almost childish. It would seem to me that if you have an act, which after all is a valuable property, your business interests are at stake here, that it's almost imperative that either you do one of two things, that you dissolve your act, that you go out of business together and reconstruct it.
This may seem very trivial to you, but it seems very important. It seems to build up to
You're
them.
quite
and
right,
hit a
sir. That's just the
crescendo.
point I'm making. These tremendous trifles are building up to a point where they're destroying this situation. And if you break it down to the relative values, it seems to me that between you and your brother-in-law, the issue is your husband, I don't think that you have quite a right to challenge so sharply to whom his first obligation is. After all, these are blood ties. You're all together. And if you could compromise, I can't quite understand why the addition of one person in your car means what it does to you. Can't you find it in your heart, you two people I'm focusing on, to compromise with one another and save your, I'm calling it your business, your industry, your living. There aren't many acts, relatively speaking, who are successes. Now, if you have an act that requires stability and coordination, you're doing a dangerous thing besides. So my strong feeling about this situation is that if you two adults would compromise and cease reducing this to childishness, and as your husband says, it may seem trivia to me, but it's big to you, and I say that you are both stumbling over molehills, mistaking them for mountains.
Will we address the respondent wife? We're sure that you absorbed the words of Miss Hurst, but do we understand that your feeling is that when your husband's brother brings these people along, female personalities, that it creates possible friction, and that goes to the heart of the whole relationship? Do you feel that it shouldn't be done?
Well, I feel that this is our business. This is not social. I mean, he has plenty of time for social life aside from business. There's no point in his...
You speak of the plural. Your brother only mentioned the one instance when he brought along a friend.
No, this is many times that this has taken place. This is the
I
one
think,
time that I've objected.
I think we should make clear, Miss Hurst, if you would like a continuation of the recital of complaints, crimes, and misdemeanors, as has been suggested here, it would take a considerable length of time. This was merely to suggest the tone and temper of the situation. Dr. McCracken?
Case reminds me of Gilbert and Sullivan, who had such a marvelous partnership. But those two had great difficulty, apparently, in seeing eye to eye with one another. And in retrospect, it's sad to think that their personal differences might have marred their productions. It seems to me, as I listen to your story, that what you have to remember, along with your thinking about the act, is that there's an art in living, on the stage and off it. And part of the art is in trying to see these situations as they blow up with sympathy for one another, with tolerance, with a sense of humor. You see, we who are spectators don't feel that these are massive concerns that you've got. And it's our impression that if you could see the situation with some humor and with some tolerance and with mutual understanding, the surface symptoms would die down. The valuable thing is the act. As Miss Hurst has said, a good act is something that the public very much wants, and surely it is to be set above your personal interests. I don't know a great deal about the world of the theatre, but I would judge that there are situations where you sink personal differences for the sake of the thing that you're doing. And if this has value, aside from the financial interest which must matter to all of you, this, I would think, would be what you would aim at. As for taking a lady with you when you go, it seems to me that the old slogan, business is business, obtains in that context, that you're concentrating on the job you're about to do, and that you mustn't have distracting elements. Now,
Do you think there might be involved here, Dr. McCracken, rules of ordinary courtesy and good manners and consideration more than anything else? In other words, you have brought home the point, and I think very eloquently, that as a spectator, it's possible for you to see, as Miss Hurst did, the trivial nature of these controversies. But do you think that we're overlooking something when we don't recognize that these people are not spectators? They're very intimately and personally involved. Their intelligence and logic are blinded by their emotions and sensitive and strong feelings. And that, of course, is pretty human.
yes. And of course, if a woman is offended or sickened by the odor of a cigar, I think there's an obligation on a man in a car to take account of their
So that
situation.
isn't a matter of ordinary courtesy and consideration.
Yes, but equally, I think a man has to defer to a woman's judgment about the clothes that she wears. This is where there has to be give and take, patience, tolerance, understanding, and especially, I would say again, a sense of humor.
Dr. Davis?
Well, the answer has been given completely and very well, and I will merely add this. I hope you will take the counsel that has been given and work it out, and then possibly write a book about it, because your problem is just about the basic problem in this whole world. The whole problem of life, it seems to me, regardless of the area you're considering, is whether I'm going to demand that I shall have what I want, my own individual desires, or whether I will forget them for the time being and think of something larger than myself. If I'm a baseball man, shall I be able to be given just what I want, or shall I do the thing that will be for the best interest of the team? If I'm a state, shall I insist that I have every right that I want, or shall I serve the union, which is larger? You go all through life. The great problem is whether or not we as individuals are willing to overlook our own little desires and whims and see that the larger unit be taken care of. And I think that your act is very important to each one of you. I think it's more important than smoking cigars or taking lady friends to Atlantic City or possibly anything that you can mention. And if you'll keep the success of this act before you, I think probably these things will appear to you the trivialities which they seem to be to us, and you will become an even greater team than you have in the past.
Well, Miss Hurst and gentlemen, since this case certainly has its counterpart in so many other similar situations, I think we might stress that it was a case deeply concerned with the most difficult art that involves human beings and the art that Dr. McCracken referred to, The Art of Living. Now, if we had the time, we could take a good deal of it to sum up all the implications in this case. But then again, no matter how much was said, it can be summed up in about 30 seconds. Namely, either this act and all it represents, according to this board, is worthwhile preserving, or it is not. Now, if it is not, then there's nothing to worry about or to talk about. If it is, Dr. McCracken and Dr. Davis and Miss Hurst are unanimous on this. If it is, without going into the numberless individual irritations of costumes and cigars and everything else, for whatever benefits there are involved, a price will have to be paid in the way of reasonable sacrifices in order to get something else, which seems to be pretty nearly the whole story of life. This is a program that deals with those strong forces that encompass us as human beings. The intention is to terminate a dispute by virtue of the authority vested in this board by the parties submitting it, cut through all other considerations to the basic issue of right or wrong, or wise or foolish, as the case may be. Now, each case submitted is an authentic experience of real life, drawn from actual events, and it presents both sides, the actual people involved. Our mediators, selected from our panel of some 40 key personalities in American life: Miss Fannie Hurst, Dr. Ralph Emerson Davis, Dr. Robert J. McCracken. Now, in this issue, 6850, there is quite the reverse of the usual mother-daughter disagreement. The parties in dispute are so close to this situation that they seek an impartial view in order to do away with future unpleasantness. Now, here is the complainant daughter.
Mr. Alexander and members of the board, this matter is, I think, unusual because it's a mother who is concerned ordinarily with the type of man her daughter goes out with or later marries. My father died when I was very young, and I'm an only child. In all these years, as I was growing up, I recall that there have been different men who came to our home as visitors, but because of my age, I never gave the matter very much thought.
Now, would you tell us just why you are here?
Mr. Alexander, I would like to settle something. Whether or not a daughter has a right, when she reaches my age, to express an opinion and have some definite influence when she knows that her mother is making a serious mistake.
Now, what is your mother interested in doing?
My mother is interested in marrying a man who I absolutely detest. He is a narrow, bigoted, cynical, material-minded person with not one quality in his entire makeup that can be respected. And just the thought of mine being related to him, even remotely, fills me with revulsion.
And when you tell your mother this and give her your opinion, what does she say?
My mother tells me this is no concern of mine, but it seems to me that I am not a child. I expect to be living at home for some time. And I would like to know that if before taking such a step, my mother shouldn't take into consideration the feelings of her own daughter.
Do you agree with your daughter?
Definitely not.
Why not?
She's a young girl, and she doesn't know anything about life. And she cannot expect me to marry somebody to please her taste.
Well, suppose you tell us something about your background.
My husband died a number of years ago, and I've dedicated myself to my daughter. Everything I did, she was my first interest. Well, she's now reached an age where she has interest of her own. And I have to begin thinking about my future, and she should not interfere.
Well, what about this man to whom your daughter refers?
This man is a perfectly fine gentleman. He'd do anything humanly possible for me, and we've been very devoted to each other. It's unusual for a girl of her age to impose an opinion in a matter of this kind.
My mother doesn't understand that she's rushing into something that I feel is a very serious mistake, and she's going to later regret it. If my mother is really devoted to me, why would she have anything whatever to do with a man who isn't good for her and who I absolutely detest?
Do you feel that your daughter has treated this man properly when he's come to the home?
No, she's been discourteous and insulting, and there's no foundation for it. He's a fine man, and he's I thought he's simply wonderful. I don't see why I think it's absurd that she should try to create a breach between us.
And ever since that there's been an indication of a possible marriage, what's her attitude been?
Well, since we spoke of future plans of marriage, she seemed to develop a strange dislike to him. I can't understand.
I just don't understand how my mother could involve herself with a man when they're like oil and water and expect me to remain at home and be perfectly happy about it.
Miss Hurst?
Well, what makes you so sure of your estimate of this man as opposed to your mother's judgment?
Miss Hurst, I feel that I can judge this man much better than my mother can. I am certainly not emotionally involved with him. Naturally, my mother is emotionally
Well, now,
involved.
as I understand you, my dear, you have talked entirely about your position in this matter, what your mother is doing to you, why she cannot expect you to remain in the home, how you feel about your mother's marriage, and your attitudes toward the man who is compatible, apparently, to your mother.
Yes, but this is based on my mother's life. I feel that my mother will not be happy with him. I feel that they are compatible now. This man has his best foot forward. Naturally, he's courting her. But once they are married, I am sure that they're going to be terribly incompatible.
Well, that is an enormous amount of certainty for a young woman to indulge in, but does it occur to you, my dear, that you are standing in the light of a possible solution for your mother? Your mother, after you have married and gone out of the home, has to think of herself. She has to look beyond the immediacy of you and your needs and your reactions. Your mother's wisdoms have been gained over the years. Let us assume that they're in error. This is your mother's life, and she is thinking ahead in terms of her own years, and I can promise you that when your life reaches a point where you are ready to leave the home, you're going to walk out of that home, in all probability, as I understand your psychology from listening to you, and there is your mother left with her life, the remnant of it, on her hands because of her deference to what I consider your immature and rather selfish, if you don't mind my saying so, attitude toward your mother.
May I answer that? I feel that my mother's future is very important to me, and I don't intend to wipe my hands off her once I do marry and leave the home. I feel that my mother is an attractive, charming, intelligent woman, and I feel that she could certainly find someone else who she will be much happier with.
Well, let me say to you realistically, my dear, and with due deference to you, madam, that a woman your mother's age is not easily going to find someone else who is as compatible as this man. Now, you may be right, but I say your mother, in this instance, wins if she loses.
Dr. McCracken?
Well, I would think, too, that the mother should be the final judge. I would expect mother and daughter, since they're so close to one another, an only child, with a momentous issue like this coming up, to talk long and earnestly about it. And I would imagine that there should be give and take. But it does seem to me that the complainant is altogether too dogmatic about what lies ahead in the future, and that she's not only emphasizing her own right, but usurping a right which is not her own, namely the right of the mother to arrive at a judgment as to what is for her best happiness.
Dr. Davis?
I agree entirely with what has been said. This woman has been married before. She's a mature woman. She presumably has thought through this situation and has come to a decision. And now I feel the only thing for her daughter to do is to try to appreciate her mother's thinking, to accept what presumably is going to take place, and it may turn out that you will change your appraisal of this man. I sincerely hope you may.
Well, this board is in agreement that with one addition, this situation is very much as it would be if the matter were reversed. Namely, if the daughter were going to marry, then the mother would give her opinion, and the ultimate decision would be up to the daughter. Now, in setting forth her view, the daughter, no matter how strongly she feels, according to this board, has done just about all she can do with one difference, that it perhaps will not be too long, as Miss Hurst has suggested, before the daughter's life is full, and the mother will be entirely on her own. By and large, the board holds with the mother in this case. We bring another session of the Court of Human Relations to a close and extend our thanks to our mediators. Now, whether we are talking in terms of mothers and daughters or of any other aspect of human relations, it is obvious that life is far too brief for misunderstanding and conflict. The poet puts it very simply: sweet are the thoughts that savor of content. The quiet mind is richer than a crown, a mind content, both crown and kingdom is.